It is my curse at this point, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So what are we going to talk about specifically? Well, we're going to do an overview of ransomware and what it is. We're going to talk about TrickBot and Riot, which are two pieces of malware that together form some threatening ransomware we've been seeing a lot lately. We're going to talk about your people and processes and what you can do to help fight ransomware in your environment. We'll talk about our top 5 recommendations for districts to stop ransomware, and then we're going to have a Q&A panel. So a few people are going to come up front, probably about half the audience at this point, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session to talk about, answer any questions you have and talk about some of their experiences. So what was the impact of ransomware in 2019? It was actually a lot worse than we were expecting. In 2018, we actually predicted there would be a downturn in ransomware. We thought we'd seen the worst of it. We thought everybody's got tools in place now, we're going to see a lot less ransomware. Boy, were we wrong. Ransomware cost us $12 billion in 2019. The cost of the average breach went from $12,000 to $36,000. Now that number does include all of the smaller ransomware campaigns as well. School districts are often paying in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in ransomware ransoms if they choose to pay those ransoms. We saw 118% growth in ransomware in the first quarter of 2019 with an average of 10 days of downtime. So that's just the downtime. That doesn't include the recovery, which can often go on for months if you are captured by ransomware. Additionally, ransomware generally has a 96% customer satisfaction. What does that mean exactly? Well, that means that if you pay ransom, you are actually pretty likely to get your data back. These people that are putting out the ransomware want to be known for their good customer service to encourage you and your friends to pay the ransom. They've even gone so far sometimes as to have call centers set up where people can call in to get help with paying the ransoms. So they're going all out to get your money. The average cost for a security breach in education is upwards of $4 million. Now that is money that we do not have to spend when it comes to school districts especially. So hopefully we're going to give you some good ideas of what you might be able to take back to your districts and do to help yourself, to stop yourself from becoming a victim. A lot of the time people have the attitude that the easiest thing might be just to pay the ransom. Like I said before, 96% customer satisfaction. Who wouldn't pay? The problem is they want you to be a repeat customer. We see it all the time where a group does pay a ransom. Guess what? 3 months later, they're victims of ransomware again because they want repeat customers. So the FBI itself doesn't really make recommendations around paying ransoms or not. They kind of just give you the options. As security professionals, we recommend you never pay a ransom because, like I said, they're going to want you to be a repeat customer. Now, there are a few different types of ransomware I wanted to discuss with you. The first type of ransomware is what's known as a lock screen ransomware. All this does is put a screen on your, a lock on your screen that says, hey, your computer has been locked, you have done something bad. In this example, it's basically saying that you violated some federal law and you need to pay a fine in order to get your computer unlocked. It's very official, got an FBI logo on it, must be legitimate, and you can pay the fine right there, it's that easy. See, the fact that it's that easy and efficient should let you know that it's not really the government involved in this process. The next type of ransomware is master boot record ransomware. This encrypts the entire computer. You can't even get into the operating system. You have basically an old DOS-style screen telling you what you need to do to pay that ransom. The next type is encrypting ransomware, and this is the one that we see most often. It only encrypts certain files on the operating system in the directory, so it's going to encrypt all of your personal files and some of the operating system files, and then it's going to let you know what you have to do to pay that ransom to get control of your computer back. And finally, we've been seeing a lot more doxware recently. This is basically a blackmail scheme where they say that they've taken your personal files and they're going to send them to everyone in your address book if you don't pay a ransom. Obviously, some people do have some files they might not want their mothers to see and things like that, and that's what they're counting on. This also can affect businesses as well, and things like student information as well, because if the student information gets taken out, we don't necessarily want that student information just to be handed out to the entire internet. The only problem with this is you have no idea if they're really deleting your data or not. They will tell you, yes, we'll delete your data. You have no actual control over that, and you can't trust them to actually delete it. So how does ransomware spread? The biggest method is via email and phishing and spear phishing. So these phishing campaigns are getting a lot more sophisticated, and we'll go into that in just a little bit. Additionally, it spreads through what's known as malvertising. So legitimate advertising networks don't always do a good job of policing themselves and don't police the ads that are running on their networks that effectively always. And there can be malware actually in advertising networks that are out there. And you click there to, your PC is infected, you're going to download the thing to uninfect it. Really, you don't know that it's actually ransomware and you're actually infecting your PC. My mom got hit by something like this recently, actually. She actually went so far as to get on the phone with someone and was talking to them, and they were trying, luckily they hadn't gotten access yet, and they were saying, well, we just need to do this to get us access. And at that point she says to them, maybe I should talk to my son about this. And they said, no, 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 you don't need to talk to your son. That's when she became very suspicious and hung up the phone. I'm glad my mother at least became suspicious at that point. Open remote desktop ports on the internet. For those of you who don't know, 3389 is the port by which remote desktop operates. We have seen districts and other organizations that have remote desktop servers exposed directly to the internet. Hey, guess what? One of the first things that get compromised in those environments are. It can be through a security flaw in the remote desktop protocol, or a lot of the time through brute force password attempts. So if you have any remote desktop servers exposed directly to the internet in your district, after this, please go and take those off the internet as soon as you can. Additionally, file serves, SMB protocol on the internet, ports 139 and 445. Those can be used to spread, especially if they're exposed to the internet, but they can also be used to spread internally if ransomware does get within your environment. And finally, via DNS. We see DNS hijacking occurring, where someone will trick your computer into going to a different website so that you think you're going to perhaps your banking website or something to that effect. You enter your credentials, and someone is actually just stealing your credentials by hijacking the DNS. More characteristics of ransomware is it will use very strong encryption. It's the same encryption that you're using to encrypt your data at rest. Hopefully all of your data at rest is encrypted, but they use that same technology to encrypt your workstation for ransomware. They also scramble the file names so that even if you find the file and might try to decrypt it, you won't know what that file is. They'll do things to delete the backups and the shadow copies so that way you can't restore from that backup. They'll even give it to you in multiple formats and languages. They'll look at the time zone you have configured and then give you the appropriate language for your regional settings to let you know how to pay for that ransom. They might put a time limit on it to give you the pressure. They might say, if you don't pay this within the next 24 hours, it's going to double in price, because they don't want you to call. They don't want you to reach out for help. They want you to pay that ransom as quickly as possible. Your infected PC is also part of a botnet. They have complete control over that PC once it has ransomware on it, so they can do anything they want with it, including exfiltrating data. So they might be able to reach in, grab your data that's on that machine, whether it's a server or a workstation, and send it up to their evil cloud in the sky. In addition, ransomware is now evasive, so it's polymorphic, so it's going to change as it spreads to try and avoid detection. It also might have a dormancy period where it's actually actively trying to hide. So when the user's on the workstation, it might remain in the background so that it goes unnoticed. And then when the user walks away, it starts taking action. They use encryption for the command and control traffic so that hopefully your firewall or DNS solution might not be able to detect that there's something going on. They achieve anonymity by using the Tor network or paying in Bitcoin, which is known to be a little bit untraceable. It's not fully untraceable as people think it is, but it's a lot harder to trace than normal cash transactions. And they also do things with domain-generated algorithms where they're constantly changing the domains in order to evade the security tools that we have in place. The good news is there are security tools that can help protect from all of these. Now, another threat that we do want you to be aware of that's kind of more of a silent threat is what's known as crypto mining software. This is ransomware's cousin to a certain degree, where it will install silently on a PC in your network and just sit there and use your electricity and your PC power to mine for Bitcoin. There's actually been a really interesting trend that's been noticed recently, is that once Bitcoin reaches $10,000 per coin or more, people turn a lot more to crypto mining software, and instead of using ransomware, they'll be using crypto mining software. Once the Bitcoin drops below 10,000 again, they go back to the traditional ransomware because they can get more money out of it. So That's just been an interesting trend that was noticed recently, that $10,000 mark for Bitcoin. A lot of people, though, have crypto mining software and they don't even realize it in their environments. So I want to talk about one particular piece of ransomware and how it spreads to your environment, so we can then start talking about ways that we might be able to stop it. So TrickBot. What happens is the user gets an email. This one says it's from Intuit. They have an invoice that needs to be paid. The user clicks to open that PDF file that's attached to see the invoice, and bam, they don't even realize it, but they've become infected with something on their workstation. At this point, it's just isolated to that workstation, and it hasn't started to encrypt anything yet. It's just sitting there on the workstation and going to start spreading out wherever it can. So it might reach out to other servers via some sort of vulnerability. A couple years back, there was a vulnerability in the SMB protocol, MS1710, that allowed ransomware to spread. So it could automatically spread to these other PCs. And again, it hasn't actually encrypted anything yet. It's just trying to be quiet, stay in the background, and take over things. Once it sufficiently spreads, or even from that first workstation, it reaches out to its command and control servers on the internet. And this is another place where we might be able to detect it at some point, because it is actively talking out to the internet. The servers then notify the hackers that they have compromised another network. The hackers do their happy dance, and they begin the reconnaissance phase of their efforts. They might lurk on your network for days, weeks, or even months, spreading around, poking around at everything, trying to gain access to everything that they can. The average malware infection isn't detected for 100 or more days. So they could be in your environment, lurking and figuring out what they want to do to attack you, learning the ins and outs of everything that you have. Finally, they deliver their payload, the Ryuk encryption software, and then you come in the next day and everything on your entire network could be encrypted. Maybe they only encrypt 25% of things, maybe they encrypt everything. No matter what, you're going to have a lot of work to do in the end. You show up at work the next day, and you might see a notepad document like this on your workstation. It's a love letter from these hackers telling you all about what they've done. There's a couple points that I like to point out. You should thank the Lord for being hacked by serious people, not some stupid schoolboys or dangerous punks. So they're letting you know that they are professionals, and they are going to get you your data back if you pay them. Also, as soon as we get Bitcoins, you'll get all your decrypted data back. Moreover, you will get instructions how to close security holes. So they're going to actually tell you how to patch the security in your environment. Guess what? At this point, they know everything about your environment, and they're not going to tell you about all the security holes that they know about. They may actually tell you about one thing that you can go patch, but they'll be back in a couple months to reinfect you when they can. So there are literally hundreds of security vendors and thousands of security products out there. What should you be focused on in your environment? I like to start by talking about the people and the processes. This is really a lot more important than the specific tools you use. We will talk about some tools in general in a little bit, but starting out with your people and processes are really what you can, the first step you can take in stopping ransomware. One process-related item is software patching. I mentioned earlier how a lot of these things will spread through unpatched systems. You want to have a good patching plan in place for all of your workstation, your Windows workstations, your Mac workstations. Those Chromebooks are magic and just tend to take care of themselves a lot of the time. But we also need to take care of the software that is on the workstations as well. Things like Adobe Flash, which hopefully will be dying by the end of this year since Chrome is eliminating support for it. But it's been known to be one of the most vulnerable pieces of software out there. Adobe Acrobat Reader is another one that commonly needs to be patched. Java is infamous in its vulnerabilities in the past. And then every piece of software out there that you have needs to be patched and scanned on a regular basis. Things like Apache web servers. Did anyone else's social security number get compromised in Equifax breach a couple of years ago? Mine was in the Equifax breach. That was because of an unpatched Apache web server. There was a patch available. They did not patch things quickly or on a regular basis, and therefore, because of careless patching practices, half of the country's social security numbers and addresses and information are now out there on the dark web. Another important thing to talk about is what's known as password and trust relationships. So we're going to talk about something called an arbitrary trust now. And what an arbitrary trust is when we trust things without even realizing we're trusting them necessarily. So I like to tell a story at this point. It's about a bank. I believe this bank was in Texas, but they had, one day someone comes in and they realize $10 million has been transferred out of the bank. It was a legitimate wire transfer according to all the records. They go to the person that did the transfer, and the person says, I have no idea how that happened. I didn't do that. The bank decides to bring in some forensics companies to do some analysis. After 3 companies come through, the first 2 couldn't figure out what had happened. The third company was finally able to determine exactly what had happened. So side story to the bank. Who here knows what Vietnamese pho is? The soup. It's good, tasty soup. It's a Vietnamese soup. Down the street from this bank was a shop that sold this soup. It was very popular. You had to go, it was inconvenient though, because you had to go down there to get the soup. Everyone was very excited one day when on the front desk some flyers appeared saying, hey, we now deliver. Just call this number and we'll go ahead and deliver that soup to you. People would call up the number. A few minutes later, the soup would show up. Everything worked out well. People were even more excited when new flyers showed up and said, hey, we have online ordering now. Just go ahead and create an account and you can now order your soup and it will be delivered. Guess what? They ordered the soup, it was delivered. And in the end, what had happened was, essentially, the soup place had no idea the deliveries were happening. A hacker group had set up a front. They had created these phone numbers. They even hired delivery drivers and paid them in cash. They interviewed these drivers, asked them, hey, what happened? They were like, look, I don't know. So they gave me cash to deliver the soup. I did what they paid me to do. What happened was, any idea what might have happened in this situation that they were able to compromise the bank? Any guesses at what happened? What was that?
USB.
No USB drives.
Somebody created an account with the same username and password.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Someone created an account at the soup website using their corporate email and the same password. And they reused that same password. And so using that, and this was a little while ago, it was before everyone had the multi-factor authentication enabled. They were able to compromise this bank, get in, and transfer out money because someone had used it. And this is a real life story. Obviously, this is an extreme one. Took a lot of effort, took a lot of planning. But that idea of an arbitrary trust, where the employee decided that he was going to use the same username and password for both, that created a trust relationship. We now trust that website for the soup ordering as much as we trust the corporate network. And by them having that password, they were able to get in. So passwords are a huge issue right now. So is this a good password on the screen there? Is that a good password? It's complicated, 8 characters or more. It's got symbols, hard to remember. So this is one we're going to write down on a sticky note. It's actually pretty easy for a computer to guess this one, and with compute power today. What about this? Is this a good password? That's a great password. You're shaking your head. No, it's more than 8 characters. It has symbols. It has numbers. That's a good password.
My wife has a similar password with a different sports team.
Really?
We don't use anymore.
What a coincidence. It's actually interesting. So we have a pretty large hacking team at CDW. They've actually developed some of their own hacking tools, including password hacking. I believe it was Medusa or it was Hydra. It's a very commonly used tool now that was actually developed by our team. But they are able to go in and they will put in the local sports team, or in case of a school, they will put in the school mascot, generate passwords to try, and they will get into accounts using those passwords. So we want to make sure our users aren't using passwords like this. But how do we do that? How do we get users to use complicated passwords that they can remember? What about this? Is this a good password at the bottom of the screen here? Yeah, this is actually the best password on the screen. It's nice and long. It's kind of random. This one's really hard to guess. So one of the mistakes we made in the past was the whole password complexity. Length is actually the most important thing, and they actually become easier to remember as well. One thing that we are encouraging a lot more now is the use of password managers. So actually having a password manager that's protected by 2-factor authentication to help our users save their passwords so they don't reuse the same password everywhere. It's just very important that if you are going to use a password manager, you need to protect it with 2-factor authentication. And we are recommending that schools try to protect critical systems with 2-factor authentication. You're probably never going to enable this for all of your students, but getting this enabled for faculty and staff in places that are critical, like financial systems, student information systems where you can, any full VPN remote access is very important. But by doing this, we can eliminate any, even if someone reuses the same password, we can hopefully stop them from being hacked by having the multi-factor authentication in place. Another one that does go along well with this is single sign-on. Hopefully you all have been exploring and implementing single sign-on in your environments so that your users will have fewer passwords to remember and manage. Another important factor to understand is what happens when someone does hack your environment. We were talking about TrickBot going through, but the first thing they always want to do is get a foothold in the environment. They get on that initial workstation. They're going to try to spread out, and they're trying to elevate their privilege, get domain level credentials, so that they can then spread to the rest of the environment and take over everything. Hopefully no one is using the domain accounts for their day-to-day activities. Hopefully you only use domain accounts for domain activities. If you have any users, or technicians that log in with domain accounts on a day-to-day basis, tell them to stop, create a regular account for them. If they have to do a domain activity, they have to switch the user and do it that way. So the question is, when you're doing this in your network, who do you want to be the ones poking around your network like this? You basically have three options at this point. You have the black hat hackers. These are the bad guys. They're trying to get into your network and get ransomware in. You have your gray hat hackers. These are probably your students. They're probably, your students probably aren't out to destroy the school or ransomware it. Okay, some of them might be. But a lot of the time they're just exploring. They're just learning, and they decide to show off or something like that and see what they can do with your school network. What I recommend is getting the person on the end to come in and do this into your environment. Getting a white hat hacker, so bringing in an outside firm to come in, do some penetration testing internally to explore where your soft, mushy insides are and what you need to do to secure those. Another important factor is logging and incident response. So if you do have a security incident, the first thing people are going to ask for is, well, where are the logs for your environment? We need to figure out what happened. A colleague of mine, Michaela, came up with this. This is Michaela's hierarchy of logging. A lot of organizations are stuck down here we call tier 0. They have no real logging in place. They have things with default logging at best. And nobody really knows how to access the logs. They're there. In the emergency, they might find some information. But that really isn't going to get you anywhere in the event that you actually do have an incident or a problem. Tier 1 is where we actually have off-device logging. So you might set up a syslog server, you're sending logs there. But again, that's very difficult to go through. You might have the logs, but you don't necessarily know what you have, and you don't have a structured way of getting through those logs. The next level we go to is what we call Tier 2. And this is HTML reporting and log review. It's a tool that helps you view your logs in a much more reasonable fashion. Tools like Splunk and Sawmill. And out of the box, they're not going to correlate things. So it's still going to take quite a bit of time to get through. Our next level, we are at Tier 3, is where we have our SIEM and SOAR solutions. That's Security Incident and Events Manager and Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. This is getting a little bit more fancy, where we have a system in place to bring in all of those logs, scrub them automatically. And with SOAR, which is a relatively newer term, it might automatically take actions based on the logs that are coming in. And it might automatically execute certain steps in order to mitigate a situation that's occurring. And finally, at the top tier, Tier 4, we have a trained human that can review these logs. Now this is probably a mythical thing for most school districts because we don't have the budgets, the time, the money to have someone that's going to be sitting there looking at our logs all day. But there are some really good options out there that can help you through endpoint protection software. Their endpoint detection and response is offered by a lot of vendors now, where they will look at these logs for you from the endpoint side and then let you know if there's a problem going on. And they might even take some degree of action based on those logs. The same thing with managed detection and response, MDR, where you can send your logs off to a third party. They will scrub them, look at them, and if there's an incident, they'll take a look at it. And if it's serious, they will let you know what's going on. So that trained human factor is a lot more available now without necessarily having these steps in between by getting a third party that can do that for you. So I mentioned phishing earlier. Phishing has become a lot worse everyone is now being targeted for phishing and spear phishing. So there are groups that are sitting in Russia, China, other countries across the world, and they are doing research on your organizations and schools. So they will go on your website, find out who works there, and figure out how to craft a spear phishing email specifically directed at one employee to get them to transfer money or release information that they shouldn't release. And they will oftentimes time this very specifically when the person they're impersonating might be unavailable or on vacation or out of the country, so that the person will not necessarily be able to reach them to confirm it. The problem is they're really taking advantage of good human nature. People want to be helpful. They want to do things that are right. They want to make everyone's life easier. So they're going to try and help out if they get an email from the superintendent or their boss asking them to complete a certain task. The problem is if we don't train our users correctly, they won't be able to recognize the fact that it's not really their boss or it's an abnormal email. I used to work for an organization that before they decided to finally implement phishing testing, where you send a test email to your users to see what the users respond. And when they started doing this, 80% of the users clicked on it. And I don't think I mentioned this. This was an IT company. So it is an IT company where you have IT people that should be smart enough to not do that, but 80% of the users still clicked on those phishing emails. Now, over time, with training and repeated email phishing attempts and educating the users, we were able to get that down to below 5%. It's hard to get below that because 5% of your users just want to click on everything. They're the ones you really got to watch close and make sure you're giving them some extra TLC to make sure they're not downloading ransomware. So if you did want to conduct a phishing campaign in your own environment, it's not that difficult to craft a good email. You probably want to target the teachers and the staff, not necessarily any IT folks or people like that. You craft a good email. Maybe it's, of course, it's a fake email from you, so you'll be impersonating yourself probably. But definitely drop some clues in there that it's fake. Make it kind of obvious, but not too obvious that it's fake. You get a fake domain. You give a fake account, and craft an email that looks like it could be from you, but is obviously not. You want to bypass your firewall and content filter to make sure it doesn't filter out your test phishing emails. A lot of the time organizations will kind of offer prizes or something for participating and not getting caught. Amazon Prime Day is actually an interesting day. Do you know Amazon Prime Day is the biggest phishing day of the year now? Because everybody's ordering things on Amazon Prime Day. Everybody's getting emails about shipments. So now the spam guys, the fishermen, if you will, are sending out emails on Amazon Prime Day saying, hey, there's a problem with your order. Click here for more information. Please enter your Amazon credentials. And they're using that to get into people's Amazon's accounts and compromise them. So when it comes to phishing and other activities, training is key. So using those service days that the teachers have to hopefully get 15 or 30 minutes of phishing education on occasion can go a long way to helping stop ransomware in your environments. There's really great tools out there now that are, I'll call them fun as training like this can be, but they're at least interactive and try to teach them as they're going through the process. In addition to training faculty and staff and teachers on phishing emails, it's also important to train yourselves and your own IT staffs, and perhaps even conduct exercises when it comes to hacking and doing tabletop exercises with third parties to help educate yourself and get to know your own environments. I mentioned those white hat hackers earlier. They can also, as part of what their engagement might be, help to educate you and make sure you understand what exactly is going on in your environment so you're prepared to stop this ransomware in its tracks. Okay, so taking a step back to this diagram we had earlier, where are the places we could have stopped this ransomware attack from happening? Well, first, we could have stopped it right there by having advanced email protection and advanced phishing protection within the email system. Gmail does a pretty good job of scrubbing out a lot of emails, but there's now even more advanced technologies out there that's going to look at your user lists, look at the actual email activity to see if people are actually falsifying emails from your users. We could have stopped it at the user by providing them with good education so that they could recognize the fact that a phishing attempt was going on and maybe stop it themselves. We could have stopped it at the workstation by having strong next generation endpoint protection to hopefully stop it from being able to execute on the workstation. We can stop it from spreading around the environment with good network segmentation. Now, this is something we don't see schools implementing a lot yet. Some bigger corporations are doing this where they actually segment every workstation from every other workstation using network access control. Not a lot of schools are doing it, but it is an option. We could have stopped it from spreading with good patch discipline and making sure everything was patched and up to date in the environment. And we also could have stopped it with strong next-gen firewalls and DNS level filtering. Now, what happens if we don't stop it? Hopefully we have good solid backups in place in order to restore systems once they are compromised. And I think in the ideal scenario is the user is smart and doesn't get taken in by it. But additionally, if we can stop it with next generation endpoint protection, that's good. But even if this doesn't stop it, if we have the tools in place to stop it from spreading, we can hopefully isolate it to a single workstation, we restore it from the backup, and everyone goes on with their day. So, we like to break down the top 5 recommendations for schools. So we went through a lot of data. My team and I sat down for a while and kind of said, okay, with the schools that we're dealing with, what are the 5 things that we would recommend that they can do that's kind of the lower hanging fruit for stopping ransomware? First, implementing next generation endpoint protection. So if you're using the free Windows Defender, that is not next generation endpoint protection. We've seen a lot of school districts using the free Windows Defender, and they get a ransomware campaign that comes through and takes everything. Microsoft does have the add-on of the advanced threat protection that does add that ransomware protection that we're talking about, but the free one does not cut it. You notice there's a lot of logos up on the screen. I'm not going to tell you which one of these is the best. It's critical that you go out, do some research, and determine which one is the best for you, but as long as you're getting one of these into place, you should be in good shape. The second recommendation we make is implementing DNS filtering. So every time you go out to the internet, you have to do a DNS query to get the IP address of where you're going. A DNS filtering solution like Cisco Umbrella will intercept that request, and if somebody is trying to go to a bad website, so if someone clicks a phishing link, it can redirect them somewhere else. In addition, that malware, the ransomware that we're talking about, 91% of it is going to use DNS to communicate out to its command and control servers. So if we can stop it from being able to communicate to its command and control servers when it gets in, it will not be able to download that payload of encryption. So you might still get a workstation that is infected, but it won't actually be able to do any damage without being able to reach out to its command and control servers. So we highly recommend looking into DNS filtering solutions. And what's nice is these are actually really easy to demo and check out, because usually you don't have to you have to redirect your DNS, you don't necessarily have to install software or make major changes. So highly recommend you check these out. Additionally, those white hat hackers we mentioned, we recommend doing some sort of security assessment. Now, there are a lot of different options out there for security assessments. This is kind of how CDW divides up our categories. A lot of different vendors are out there that will do security assessments for you. From rapid assessments, where you might take a small segment of the network to do a deep scan into it, comprehensive security assessments, where we look at everything and do things like password cracking as well to see who's been using the Go Pirates password and whatnot. Application security assessments, where we can actually assess the security of a student information system or other applications that you might be using in the environment. We also will help you with policy development. So if you did want to get things written down, which is one of the key things that a lot of organizations don't have, is developing that written security policy and the written plans for what they're going to do in an emergency. Also doing framework and controls gaps analysis. So we can help you with that, or you could start doing some of that yourself. The CIS Top 20 is a good place to start. It's a CIS Top 20 security controls. You can go out there, review these, and find out where you align to see, do you have any of these top 20 covered, or what do you have to do in order to get there? And finally, those tabletop exercises can be very valuable to training yourself and understanding where your environment is. The fourth recommendation we make is educating your users. Now, 77% of threats require user intervention. So 70% of these bad things require the user to take action for it to happen. By using products like we have listed on the screen here, you can educate your users and teach them not to click on those phishing links, to teach them not to give away information they shouldn't be giving away. So conduct those regular phishing exercises, and providing your users with phishing education is critical. Our fifth recommendation is implementing strong patch and backup discipline. Because again, we want to have those patches in place so that this malware can't necessarily spread through the environment easily. And also we want to have good backups in place so that if something does become infected, we can easily restore it from a backup without having to wait to restore it from scratch. In addition to these, it's also important to be scanning for those vulnerabilities of what you need to patch. Because it's easy to say have strong patch discipline, you have a patch server, but what about all those third-party applications you have installed? There are software tools out there. A lot of the endpoint protection software will actually do that for you. Well, they'll give you reports about all the software installed on the workstations so that you can know what is unpatched and patched in your environment, including things like Flash and Acrobat that we talked about earlier. Another item I did want to tell you about is our zero-cost CDW threat check. So what this is this is a zero-cost offering from CDW where we will send you a box. This box is running Cisco Firepower, Splunk Tenable Vulnerability Scanner, and Carbon Black Endpoint Protection. You put it off a SPAN port of your internet connection for a week, and at the end of the week, one of our engineers will give you a detailed report of everything bad that we saw going in and out of your network. And we don't just hand you the piece of paper. Our engineer gets on a WebEx with you for an hour to go over the details of what they found. It's really a great way to build a case for more security in your environment. And like I said, this is absolutely no cost and no obligation to you. The biggest pain point of this is you have to take the box out, you have to take the server out of the box, plug it in, and then ship it back to us when you're done. So when it comes to the CTC, I always like to show what our top results are. So we've done I think thousands of these CTCs at this point, and this is what we see most commonly in the environments that we're in. We see active crypto mining. That's the #1 thing. We talked about the crypto mining software earlier. Most of our customers have that in their environment and they don't even know it, and this will reveal that. We see clear text credentials being sent in and out over the internet. We see anonymous browsing VPNs in use. We also see a lot of unsanctioned cloud storage. So you might have teachers that are using Box or other cloud storage that they shouldn't be using, that you don't have control over. And we see active, active known malware coming in and out of the environment. We also look at weaknesses. So as part of this CTC, we do ask you a series of questions about your environment and the plans that you have. And then we let you know where we see there might be gaps in your environment and the steps you could take to fill those gaps. Another item that CDW does offer that I wanted to let you know about is our zero-cost incident response retainer. So most incident response retainers, this is where you get a company on retainer that you can call in the event that you have a problem. Most of them are going to cost you $20,000 or $30,000 up front. Ours costs $0 up front. You just pay by the hour when you engage us for assistance. And we can help out with things like the incident triage, the containment, the remediation of problems in the environment, and then we give you a good response report of what we found if you do have a security breach. And if nothing else, this helps people sleep better at night, knowing they have someone to call in the event of an emergency. So I like to summarize those top 5 points. So this is the one I tell people to take a picture of, because these are the top 5 recommendations that we make for school districts to take action to help stop malware in their environment. I really want to emphasize number 1, by making sure you have that next generation endpoint protection. It'll go a long way to stopping ransomware in your environments.
Question.
Yes.
CWG, is Carbon Black available?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, it should be. I don't know if there's any caveats. The CWG and CDW do have the same threat check, so as long as there's nothing in place on your organization that says you can't use it, it should be fine. Okay, so now we're going to bring up our panelists. We're going to do a little bit of a panel discussion to talk about some real world things about security. So I'm going to bring a couple more chairs up. We'll grab one here. These are already disconnected. Turn off this thing. It's really fun how they connect the chairs here. Makes for some entertainment if people try to grab a chair.
Just turn around and hold up.
Right. I know it's a little smaller audience than the previous session, but we're not going to shortchange anybody, I promise. Want to bring the same kind of knowledge and expertise that these fine gentlemen have encountered in the last couple of years here. So my name is Derek Delamonica. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for our Pennsylvania team that covers K through 12 education. Really appreciate everybody being part of this presentation today. So if you guys would like to go around the line, just introduce yourselves, making sure everybody knows which organization you're with. We'll jump right into a couple of questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Rich Platts from North Allegheny School District. I'm the Director of Technology and Innovation.
Frank Cunning from Limber Area School District. I'm IT Director.
Sidney Clark, Business Manager for the Shanksville Sandy Creek School District.
I'm Dino Amato. I'm a Security Field Solutions Architect, CDW.
I'm Michael. You already met me. See, I consider it a victory as long as the participants outnumber the number of panelists. Then it's a win.
He said it. So, Rich, we'll just start with you. I know you and I talked a little bit earlier this week about your district being on a cyber maturity liability journey here. So, could you tell us a little bit more about what you're taking to improve your security footing in this?
Sure. We've been looking at a lot of our different sort of areas along a maturity model, because we know that this is not something that you just fix right away, right? You don't just immediately snap your fingers one day, buy something from our friends at CDWG, and suddenly you're secure, right? There's a lot more to it than that. And so we need to know sort of where we're going and what our roadmap is, but we need some things to measure ourselves against. So we're kind of on this journey where working through the policy, like the policy and security goals, and making sure that we know what compliance looks like for us, so that we can then start building out from that. And really have an actionable awareness and training program that we're working with our staff members, and then continually reviewing that process and making sure that we are understanding our environment, gathering information, and strategizing around opportunities to make changes in line with contracts and those kind of things, so that we're able to be educated when it comes time to make a decision.
Great. Is there any kind of resources that you guys have utilized throughout that process?
So we're working with a third-party cybersecurity partner, and in our particular case, the reason why I liked going with this particular partner, they're a local company in Pittsburgh, and they don't sell any products, right? So I talked to a number of different vendors who came to the table when I was evaluating this. And they all kind of had a pitch for like a really great technical solution to solve the problem, when I was asking for somebody to work with to identify the issues and the problems that we have. So at that point, CDW was not one of the folks that I talked to, so I don't want to throw those guys under the bus. But I like having them agnostic so that they can give me an opinion about what's out there and what we can utilize. And there's also a lot of really good free resources that are available to schools. MSISAC, if you're not familiar with them, MS-ISAC, it's the multi-state, I'm not even going to try, but it's a Department of Homeland Security group that shares information, and also they will do some free penetration testing and vulnerability assessments and those kind of things that are available to schools. So it's nice to have, like, I think down the road we're going to look at leveraging them to say, hey, we've got our partner that's doing penetration testing for us. Let's get another person to come in and do a free assessment. How do they match up? Are they telling us the same thing about our environment? So getting a couple of different sets of eyes. There's a lot of resources available at a lot of schools, and some of them very low cost.
Right.
So if I can throw in one thing that not a lot of people know about CDW, is that when you do a penetration test with us, that organization is actually siloed from the rest of us. So the results of penetration tests done by that team are never shared with the sales team, or never even shared with Dino or I, unless you decide you wanted to share those with us. So we do silo that off for that exact reason, because we don't want to be, we're not just coming in to sell a product at that point. The team is really there to give you an honest assessment of the security of the environment.
Yeah. Thanks for adding that in. Rich, if there's anything you could have done earlier in the process to get yourselves prepared, is there any one or two things that you guys could have approached differently?
I would have ripped the Band-Aid off and done two-factor earlier for my staff.
Yep.
I knew it was going to be a pain point, but sometimes you have to be nudged a little bit without saying too much. So don't wait to have a close call to do the things that you know you need to do, even if they're going to be difficult.
Great. And that kind of it's a good segue into what Frank mentioned in the previous panel here too about being part of the MSI SAC community and having some kind of insurance policy in place for your district. Would you like to shed some light on that?
Yeah. So we just signed up with the MSI SAC probably about 6 months ago, and we're a much smaller school. We have about 1,100 students. I'm the tech director, and we have one computer technician. And basically, what happens in our school, anything that plugs into the wall, I or that technician become in charge of that. So to keep in front of everything, especially with cybersecurity being at the top level of what we need to be on top of, the MSI SAC has really been a godsend to myself for being able to implement security patches and so on and so forth with that, and all the free resources that they have available to us, and it's free for all schools. So it's definitely something that I would encourage everybody in the room to be a part of. And just going on a little bit, I did do this threat check with CDW, and that was last year, and we did get a nice report that sat through the WebEx with the engineer, and really opened my eyes up. And the report, then I was able to leverage and go to our school board and administration to be able to justify cost, really. So that was a huge help. And also recently we have purchased cybersecurity threat insurance. So if you don't have that, that's definitely something to look into in case of any issues going on.
Understand the policy, where
Yeah.
where the cutoff points are, and that knowing that you might still be responsible for the first 50 grand or whatever, depending on the policy that you have in place. It's important to understand that policy really well.
Yeah, now just sitting through this, we just purchased insurance $4 million, and your slide's $4 million is an average, so we're short $3 million now.
Well,
Decided where to buy the insurance, or?
We just went through our local insurance agency that the school already has, so they were able to find that for us.
and Cindy, since you guys are kind of in close proximity here to Frank, is there anything you'd like to piggyback off of what he just mentioned too?
Yeah, we actually had to use our cyber insurance here right after Thanksgiving. We were one of 3 districts in our area that were brute force attacks, all in the same IP range, Xfinity IP range. And it just happened to be a semi-retired financial server that we no longer used for active service, but still had for referential purposes, that still had a generic support ID that was established back in 2008 from a company that no longer exists. And happened to be an RDP port that was still open on that particular server as well. So the perfect storm came over Thanksgiving break. We came in thinking it was just your normal extended weekend gremlins that you normally have to deal with after an extended break, and spent my 2.5 weeks between Christmas or Thanksgiving and Christmas doing everything I didn't want to do. I never got to my list. I ended up, the cyber insurance policy worked real well. Our insurance included free law firm support. A law firm down east in Pennsylvania who have 42 lawyers that deal with nothing but cyber attacks, which is kind of weird to think that a law firm needs 42 lawyers on staff to handle this. And they said they're getting calls on a daily basis. So the insurance covered all of our law costs. We did have a couple of deductibles, tiers set up in our deductible if we were doing forensic analysis or any kind of negotiation or data restoration. So our $5,000 deductible could have went up to 15 if we were going to go through the whole package. But we were able to do forensic analysis only. Took us about a month and a half, but we recovered everything that we could recover, and ended up with a couple of servers we still had to build from scratch. So
One thing, just to piggyback on that, because that's really good about the law firm, and I never thought about this, was when you go through your insurance and work with a law firm, you're often working under privilege and confidential, and so from a right to know perspective, it offers you a different level of protection than you might not have thought about that, right? That by going through this law firm, it's all privileged at that point. Until it's all
To a certain point.
Until it's
Somebody-
over, and then it's right to knowable after the report might come out.
And Dino, I know you had a couple of stories you wanted to highlight here too.
Yeah, sure. Just sort of going off of what Michael presented about being prepared. There was an organization that we worked with here recently with our incident response retainer. We were able to go in, identify the problem, and help remediate it, tell them what you need to do for it not to happen. But the biggest issue was they used default logging. They had no remote logging or anything sent anywhere. So triaging the issue was very difficult. So I would look into doing something with logging to, like what Michael pointed out. And also, as far as backing up of your files, I had another organization that we were engaged with where they got hit by ransomware. It took that, they lost 60% of their data on their servers. The bad part was their backup site was connected to their primary network, so after it wiped out the primary, it took out the secondary. So they had no way to go back other than build everything from scratch. 6 months later, they were still trying to recover from it. So look into a better backup solution other than something directly attached to the primary network.
Great, thanks, Dino. So any questions from the audience, things that we didn't maybe touch on up here?
I have a question about, I noticed you had Veeam up there. That's what we use as our backup for our VMware environment. We do a local backup to a particular server and replicate it to another device at another building. How vulnerable are those to a ransomware on the backups themselves?
I'll take a shot at this. If it's on a file system that the vulnerability or the ransomware can get to, like a SMB share, it's going to get encrypted at the file level. And let's say the server itself gets ransomware, and you just happen to take your Veeam snap at that same time, you've backed up ransomware. So I guess it depends on how you want to time that. So I've heard different people talking about different backup strategies to get around that, and seems to be a toss on what the best way is to do it.
Where it came from, we use Veeam too. We actually bought a brand new tape drive. So it wrote the tape. I mean, it's you can't encrypt tape. Yeah. So as much as you hate to go, oh my God, I went backwards in time. The new versions of tape are quick. And it's easy to just take that cartridge out, there's a rack of cartridges. Put it in a suitcase, take it out. And you do that once or twice a week, or 3 times, however many times you want. You go home for the night, take your tapes with you. That's how we.
I've had one organization ask about air gap backup. So similar to what the tape is, that would be our alternative. But as far as the best way to do it, I couldn't comment on that.
I actually talked to a district and they were literally unplugging the backup server. Like they plugged in, which is not a good way to do it because you never know when the ransomware is going to be in there. You never know how long your backups are going to take. But I have heard of people doing the tape backups again as well. So there's different options out there. We do have a storage team that could probably offer a little more insight than Dino and I here. So I have to get them on the phone.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, gentlemen, appreciate the participation and thank you all for coming by today too. Thank you. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
15 minutes. Yeah, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate the help today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, if there's anything we could do for you, you got me on board now too. So
Yeah, so Cregan, how's that work? Is it both you guys or?
So Cregan rolls up to me. I'm his manager. I've got 12, 20 people on the team that I'm responsible for now too. So he's still your main guy, but if there's anything that I can help push as far as agendas go, things that we need to escalate, I'll be working more with you guys too.
That's, I just sent him a few things.
I don't know if we
Still building off of
Yep.
from last year.
Make sure we get you a copy.
Yeah, well, you might hear from me from time to time if you need anything from me.